everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. You got me and you got Nate. Nate, it seems like it's been a minute since we've talked, but also it seems like this has been like the longest fucking month ever in the history of man. So maybe it was recent. Maybe we have recently talked and it's just, every day is 100 years now.
Yeah, I mean, it was 2 weeks, I think, since the last time we recorded, because you and I have both done bonus episodes and regular episodes solo. Um, yeah, it's been a while. Things are weird. They continue to get weird here. I think the United States and the United Kingdom are neck and neck on which country can be the dumbest in terms of how they handle this crisis. And we're just sort of waiting to see what happens. So that being said, weirdly, the military is getting invoked already. Less so here, where there has been some talk of potentially calling up the army to backfill police. This was discussed, of course, the British government, being a hard right government of complete fucking idiots, hasn't really put forth anything in terms of concrete evidence, but rather just leaks stuff to the right-wing press as if they're trying to, run an election campaign against Jeremy Corbyn and, for the rest of our lives until, the fucking sun explodes. But instead,
How are they going to blame anti-Semitism on the virus or something?
I'm sure they'll, oh my God, I'm sure they'll fucking...
The Tories have one move, and it's yell anti-Semitism
while they're dedicating a fucking Nazi statue. Yeah, exactly. It's like, how dare Jeremy Corbyn, while I'm fucking singing the praises of like this Nazi fucking MP who basically was like, God, I love Hitler. I hope Hitler gets rid of the Jews in 1935 or whatever the fuck. Like, yeah, don't even get me started. Like, stupid country full of fucking morons, dumbest political system you could possibly imagine, incredible idiots, but they have talked about potentially bringing the army to backfill police in their background briefings to right-wing press, but there hasn't been any manifestation of that. Whereas in the United States, as you have talked about with me, and we're going to talk about today, there have at least been things as far as Trump's executive order and some of military sort of making overtures towards recently separated people. It seems like there is going to be a military response involved.
Oh, I mean, there already is. National Guard units in many states have already been called up. I actually got one of my managers pinged me. It was a while back, and she's like, the National Guard has been activated in our state here. Like, what does that mean? And I'm like, it just means that they, here's the thing: when the National Guard is activated at this stage, like what we have right now, what they're doing is they're saying we need bodies to move boxes. We need somebody to move these boxes from here over to there. It is not going to become Kent State yet. I'm just saying at this point, the National Guard is just out there because it's easy to. I mean, look, it's easy to like force soldiers into doing this kind of stuff because that's what we've broken their brains into doing. It's like, no, you're going to put the uniform on. You're going to do the thing that I tell you to do because the thing on my chest says that I'm better than the thing that's on your chest. So, we're very well conditioned for things like that. Though I do have to say, I really enjoy the panicked pictures of trains with like tanks and shit on it. It seems like every couple of months, maybe once a year, you see one of those things and it goes around, and I guess COVID has really exacerbated it. I want to put it out there right now. Most of those tanks you see on the trains don't work at all. Like, not ready to do anything. So don't worry about those. Really, you got to worry about your cops more than you got to worry about a soldier at this stage of things. We'll see how things shake out. We'll see how April goes, everybody. But but yeah, there's a military response on the state level, and then of course the military has its own shit to deal with. I mean, we've got our own bases and everything. I believe I just read today that Paris Island is being shut down for training purposes. Like, we're not even making new Marines and possibly new soldiers pretty soon, depending on how this goes. And it's one of those things, Nate, where like I know that everybody is saying like, okay, well, we just have to make it through April. And like I don't think anybody's truly understanding that no, you don't just make it through April. Like, this is a good thinning of things out, but like as soon as you say May 1st, we're like, all right, we're going to throw all the training privates back into basic training. they're all going to get fucked over by COVID. Like, it's not going anywhere anytime soon until we get a vaccination. But you know, as we have dedicated 3+ fucking years of this podcast to, pointing out that the military is not smart in any way, shape, or form. Like, it's not well run. It's not run by intelligent people, and the few intelligent people that are in there are generally told to shut the fuck up. So,
yeah, it's not looking great. And I mean, I think about this too, that people that we know in person, people that we know from the show, like Anthony Clark, who's running for Congress in my former congressional district where I used to live in New York City. He was a medic in the military, and he actually got an email saying, "Hey, are you interested in coming back to active service or for the duration of the crisis?" People who were medical personnel, people who were, especially doctors, what you call medical corps officers, actual doctors and such, are definitely getting hit up pretty hard. There was discussion, with them bringing up an active ready reserve. I thought about this for myself because you may not know this, but if you're an officer, you technically can be called back forever. Now, I don't think they've really done this. I know that folks who are retired, like put in 20 years and retire, they're technically on IRR for a really long time afterwards.
yeah,
And
I'm close to retirement at this point. Like, I'm in the last within the last thing of my contract. So and that is, it's like, you're not out of the Army. You just move to the retired reserve, which they do that for like retirement paperwork purposes, but also, like, little caveat down in the small print is like, by the way, we can call you back up. Now, if I'm part of a dying MOS, so it doesn't really matter. Nobody needs public affairs anymore, because we just do war crimes and we don't feel the need to cover it up anymore. So I'm not worried about it. But yeah, Nate, they might extradite you. Boris Johnson might come, knock on your door and send you back to America to go stand on the border and fall asleep in a guard tower while jerking off, just as we all did.
I mean, I was thinking about this though, because there's not really much. I was an infantry officer, so there's not really any particular skill set required from me. That, I mean, you'd have to be in a really bad situation before that would start happening. But I mean, I also don't live in America, so I don't think it's going to happen. But I mean, there's a lot of things that I didn't think were going to happen that did happen. So who even knows? I'm not excited by the prospect, but also I don't live in America. So if it gets to the point where I legitimately come down on orders, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. But obviously, the big concern that comes to my mind when I think about that hypothetical situation is my parents are elderly, or they're not elderly, but they're retirement. They're in their mid-60s. My grandparents are in their 90s. My brother is the only family member, that lives in the United States that is like close with my parents. So my fear is obviously, like, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I would go to prison if I ever went back to America. But who even fucking knows? It's crazy. So what I do know is I doubt it's going to get to that point, because I think that I bet you if you get into a situation in which the military needs to be stepping into certain roles, you're also going to be in a situation where so many people are going to be out of work that lots and lots and lots of folks who are eligible in the sense of being on IRR, being in the inactive reserve, et cetera, being Army Reserve, National Guard, Reserve components, what I meant by that, are going to volunteer. Like, I just can't imagine you're going to see a need for them to be snatching folks out of fucking, private citizen life to go back in uniform. And if they did, the people they would be doing that to would be people with medical specialties. Like, I don't really know what point you would be able to achieve by taking, former grunts and making them do grunt stuff. Like, what are we going to do? Fucking build tents badly so they fall on patients? I mean, like, come on. Like, it's the army realized, after the invasion of Iraq and realizing they had to do an occupation, I guess the Department of Defense realized that it's much easier to just have, minimum manning of actual troops and then just use infinity money to buy contractors for everything else. And that's what they're going to do. So I don't foresee in current circumstances, barring a very, very significant change in the conditions, us turning into like a World War II style economy and them actually drafting people or actually bringing folks back forcibly, like involuntarily. They've done it before. I saw it with my own eyes in 2007, but I just don't see it. And furthermore, I think the point that you previously raised is also an interesting one, Francis, that one thing that is going to be affected by this is whether or not you can put people through any kind of training pipeline. When we talked about it before, conditions are pretty unsanitary already, just when you have a bunch of disgusting fucking 17 to 21-year-old privates in a room together. Lord only knows when you actually have to factor in an epidemic what that's going to be like. And, quite frankly, a significant amount of the spreading of the epidemic or the pandemic in 1918 through 1920, when the Spanish flu hit, was because of troop movement, because of troops getting it in training, it spreading, mobilizations, etc., it being on ships, it being in camps, these troops going to the front, coming back from the front, all these kinds of things. And so in a way, I think it's going to change a lot of the military sort of ability to function. I produced the Lions Led by Donkeys podcast, and one of the co-hosts, Nick, is active duty military, and he was put in 14-day quarantine at the base where he's stationed because he might have potentially been exposed to COVID-19. And so they were recording the podcast. He was having to do it from they put him up in a bunch of him and a bunch of other troops in just unused barracks rooms, but he wasn't allowed to come home. He wasn't allowed to leave. They brought them chow every day. He basically had a barracks room with a bathroom and shower, and he couldn't leave. It was 14 days of being in jail. So I don't know if you do that at scale, how that changes the military's ability to function. But I certainly think it's going to be weird.
Yeah, and the Pentagon has actually put out that they don't want the military, they don't want individual installations talking about their COVID outbreaks, their numbers of people that they've tested positive for COVID. And they Mark Esper says that this is so that ISIS can't they don't want our enemy knowing that we're getting fucked by COVID, which you could watch anything and find out that that's happening. There's no reason to say that these people that Fort Irwin or Fort Benning shouldn't be talking about these things, because honestly people need to know, because one, those soldiers, when they leave base and they go get tattoos and payday loans and, go to strip clubs, are going to the, places that are right outside of where they're at. Now, obviously, all those places are probably closed at this point. But at the same time, I've just never known it to be a good idea to hold back information, especially during times of crisis, like a pandemic, to say okay, we're not going to talk about these things. As your PAO, let me tell you what you should be doing, Mark, because I know you listen. You should be getting ahead of it. You should be actively pursuing testing and quarantining and stopping these things on these bases. But nobody's going to do that, so all you're going to do is say, well, we're not going to talk about it. And when you say I'm not going to talk about it, does it mean, for me at my level, as a staff sergeant, nobody's going to tell me if there's somebody it's just, nobody wants to give that proper information to the soldiers. And if nobody gives soldiers proper information and gives them guidance, they're going to do dumb shit just because they don't have the guidance, not any fault of their own, but, your general, not a general, but your everyday captain in the army, is possibly a decent leader, but there's still probably, how old were you when you made captain? 20-something?
I was 25, almost 26.
Yeah, you can make captain. You get your degree, then you make captain 25, 26, if you're on a good trajectory. And, that's fine. That's a perfectly fine age, I guess, to be of a...
That was fast, though. That I believe has changed. When I was in,
I met a fucking 31-year-old master sergeant, dude. It's all fast at this point, and it's just,
yeah. They were promoting people and then they weren't. I remember they were slowing down the trajectory for a while. My age group, year group, got got promoted at 36 months to captain, but I remember a guy I knew who was year group '08 said, I was '07, said they were going to be promoting at 40 months, and then '09 was 44 months, and like basically they were slowing it down. But then after shrinking the army, they have now gone back to expanding the army again. So who even knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that you have a lot of young, inexperienced people who are gaining experience, but they're looking up. They're looking up their command structure, and their ranks to get information. Like, what do we do? Because fucking when the world was, closing down shop, or I guess when at least America finally pulled its head out of its ass and started closing things down and saying, everybody stay, shelter in place, stay where you're at, only go out for the necessities. Fucking soldiers were still doing, they're still doing group PT and group formations and all getting together in big rooms to have meetings about COVID-19. And it's just because nobody above them told them to stop fucking doing it. And this is, and the problem is that, like, for me as a staff sergeant, looking up to the field grade or whatever, or whoever my officer is, we're not necessarily blind leading the blind, but, we can come up with a plan. But the higher you go, like, say, me and my captain, say me and Nate, your commander and your PSG, look out and they say, this is fucked up. We need to stop doing group PT. We need to stop, doing all these trainings that have everybody, together. And we have to stop doing everything. We have to stop. We have to lock our soldiers down so that we don't have these problems. And then what's going to happen, Nate? You're going to get a fucking light bird that's going to come down on our asses saying, why aren't you doing exercises? Why aren't you doing PT? Why aren't you doing this, that, and the other thing? And then we will be forced by law to start doing these things again. And hey, maybe the lieutenant colonel will be on our side, but then there's going to be a full bird colonel or a general or a fucking commander in chief who's going to say that it's a hoax for the first like month and a half of it happening. So I don't know. The military, like, I'm glad that the military is getting involved in the ways that we want them to be involved. They're bringing hospital ships to New York. They brought the hospital ship Comfort to New York. They're activating National Guard to be bodies to move stuff. Hopefully they're giving everybody the proper PPE. I mean, I know our fucking doctors and nurses don't necessarily have it, so I don't know if Private Schmuckatelli's got it as well. But I don't know, man. Like, the military is really, it's just gonna be fucked, I guess. Like, the military is about to get fucked by COVID. So,
and I think that's something that's interesting to talk about, is the extent to which there has always been this kind of, I don't know, maybe safety net concept that if things get really bad, America trusts the military. We can depend on the military. We have this huge military budget. But I think this is going to reveal just how not applicable that thing is in the current situation, in the sense that, yes, you can use the military to, for example, add hospital capacity. You can build field hospitals. You can, have medical units and then augmentees to medical units running things. But that's not really a solution. That's just something to mitigate a worst case scenario. And I don't think people are going to learn shit from this, because I think that there's a very sort of sequential, almost Aaron Sorkin-esque kind of thinking that people have, that, oh, well, a bad thing happened and the bad people did bad things, so everyone's going to see how bad the bad people are, and then they're going to blame the bad people for the bad thing, and the bad people are going to say, oh, damn, I fucked up because I'm bad, and then everyone's going to clap. And that never happens. People just lie. They just, they spin shit out. They refuse to accept, the truth. And, folks who were wedded to the sort of like Trump death cult, they want to be buried in the fucking sarcophagus, aren't going to look at this and say, oh, we messed up. We failed. We made a mistake. There, you can see the weird Federalist fucking, bootlicker freaks trying to call it the Wuhan virus and say it's bioterrorism from the Chinese. You can just see the way that the Trump administration is handling it. And I think if there was a lesson that I wished people learned, it's that America's healthcare system is a nightmare, and it actively discourages preventive medicine. And as a result, people aren't going to get seen, aren't going to get care, aren't going to be able to seek treatment until it's basically too late. And the profit motive and just-in-time kind of fucking supply chains and such has created a situation in which private hospitals are going to go bankrupt. Medical systems that are almost entirely private or, for profit are going to collapse. We spend, hundreds of billions of dollars on the military, on the Defense Department, and, even more on discretionary spending for wars abroad. We're going to really wish we had spent some of that infinity money on hospitals and healthcare and things like rural hospitals, things like, keeping fucking senior centers safe and stuff. Just all these things that could stop this, could mitigate this, could have made it so we could control it and prevent it. But now it's gotten so out of control that you're in a situation in which not only is it going to continue to get worse, and not only is it going to sort of kick down all of the set pieces and show the falseness of what America's economy actually is versus what people think it is. But it's also going to be in a situation where not even your pull the military failsafe is going to work. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be able to solve this problem by using the troops. Like, even if you pull every single fucking aircraft carrier, carrier group back to America and use the onboard medical facilities on those boats, as well as all the military bases, hospitals, as well as all these things, it's not going to work. Because, for one, you don't have the ability to keep the care providers safe because you don't have the protective equipment, you don't have the quarantine facilities, you don't have the political will to do this in an emergency situation. You've got 40% of the population thinks that it's the libs are making stuff up. And you also just you don't have a large enough military to confront the problem if you wanted to use the military as the prime sort of source, which, don't get me wrong, is incorrect. It is the wrong approach. You should not do that. If you use the military as augmentees to deliver food, fine. Scary and weird, and I don't like it, especially in an American context when you think about how the cops literally, how cops can murder people in open daylight on video and fucking get acquitted day in and day out. But if you frown at a police dog, you get 10 years in prison. I don't like that at all. And so I'm not saying you should, but I'm saying that even if you did do that, the only way the military can augment anything is to use the military as additional manpower to augment an ongoing medical response. And in America, it strikes me that what people are trying to do instead is to default to this idea that, well, don't worry, we have hospital ships. Okay, great. They can house that many. Does that hold 3,000, 4,000 people? I mean, cool, but that's not the solution.
That's really helpful if you're next to an ocean. I'm
and not only that, but I mean, maybe they can send an old-timey paddle boat up the Mississippi that has hospital beds on it.
Fucking Mark Twain.
But everyone has to be dressed like Mark Twain costumes. Yeah,
Mark Twain putting me on a ventilator.
But I mean, I think Trump refusing to invoke the Defense Production Act, or the extent to which basically all of the companies that could have been making ventilators have colluded to avoid it because they're trying to protect profit margins. The fact that you're seeing a relief bill that's going to cut checks to people but isn't going to protect them for the duration of the crisis is going to be used to allow companies to do stock buybacks and executive bonuses and then get billions of dollars of taxpayer money. The system is continuing to fold back on itself. And I think America in particular is so incredibly exposed to this because you have a combination of terrible, terrible health infrastructure overall in terms of the average person's ability to afford it, ability to access it, and the disparities that includes, when you think about rural and non-urban populations versus urban populations. And then you also have this incredibly rapacious profit kind of, authoritarian corporate state where corporations and, the people who represent them have so much influence that they would basically step in and stop the government from doing things to help people because then you can't go work at fucking Domino's or whatever. even though you not going and working at Domino's is the thing that's going to help curtail this crisis. And so what I'm saying is the aggressive, like, you either work or you fucking get put into a mill and ground up to be made into chicken feed mentality of America, and the total lack of healthcare mentality of America makes me think that it is probably among the worst suited countries to deal with this. And there's a theory that I've seen floated around that, people love to talk about America and the United Kingdom and the special relationship and so on. But really, America has more in common with Brazil than it does with the United Kingdom. And I think if you look at Brazil, where Jair Bolsonaro is basically saying that the libs made up coronavirus and it's not real, he's going around like handshaking as many people as he can, it's a good indication of where it's going. And I'm worried because I honestly, I cannot give you. It is 1 p.m. in the United Kingdom on March 31st as we're recording this. I cannot tell you where I think we will be on May 1st. I cannot for the life of me imagine where we will be in America, in the United Kingdom, in the world in, a month and some change. Because this is progressing in such a way, and America genuinely seems to think it's not real, or it won't be that bad, or it's worth just fucking collapsing completely to avoid the government giving people relief or giving people healthcare. And we've said for fucking years on this show, you and me, that the true essence of being an American is I would rather burn my own house down than let my neighbors have something nice. And I cannot, for the life of me, envision a better illustration of that than I'd rather destroy my economy, completely destroy the country, have it be the worst affected country on the planet by this virus, than give people money to stay home like we want them to do for medical reasons. Like that, to me, nothing could be more American.
Hey, don't you see, staying at home is going to be what kills the economy, not going back to work and coughing on everybody and then a couple percentage points of our country dying. Our favorite veteran, Jesse Kelly, in fact, said that he would throw himself on the funeral pyre of capitalism if it meant to save the economy, which is just weird, and also like very unimaginative, I think. If like your only options are either we have a good economy or the economy crashes because of a pandemic, then I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe that economy is not well thought out, probably not well planned, and maybe there's a different way that we can do it. And I'm not going to outright say socialism, but it's called socialism. I'm sorry. Or at least something, man, because I cannot imagine like being part of this weird capitalistic death cult of being like, I will sacrifice. Somebody called it a glorious death, which, to die coughing in an overflow hospital bed and shoved inside of a parking lot is a glorious death, I suppose. I mean, there was that weird dentist fucking representative that said that he would rather die gloriously in battle than due to a pandemic, which, you have those options at any point in time. It's not like America's not at war constantly, but for some reason these weird people never seem to join up and go do the wars. Maybe there's something there. Nate, also, I don't fucking understand why anybody would say like, oh, bring in the military, they'll fix it, when, I mean, we haven't fixed Afghanistan in 19 fucking years. We can't fix anything, man. Like, we can't, like, the one thing the army is good at is shooting something. If we can't shoot our way out of, a fucking actual war, I don't know what you think we're going to do here in a pandemic situation. We can't shoot the virus. We can start shooting people who are infected, like it's some sort of zombie thing. Maybe you want us to do that. I don't know. That's really the only thing that the military is good at. And even then, we're not very good at it. We're like the Soviets, that we have a whole lot of numbers and production, and that's about it. That's where American strength comes from. Also, everybody in the military is, for the most part, brainwashed, except for the cool people who listen here, obviously. So I wouldn't trust us, man. I wouldn't if the military shows up. I'd just like if I was in charge of like a something and a bunch of soldiers showed up, they're like, okay, what am I gonna have to fix because you showed up here? Like what are you guys gonna fuck up because or I'm gonna have to take time out and I'm gonna have to train you to do something because you don't know, and that's not the fault of the soldier. It's not the fault of the person who's being told, plucked up from wherever and shoved somewhere. It's not on them to not be having been given that information. It is on, the administration who says, rather than saying, hey, let's go to Francis and see, what direct aid can we help you with to do whatever it is that you're doing to help these people in your community. We're just going to give you some bodies and say, that's good enough, right? You just tell these people what to do and then they'll do it. Like, if I needed people, maybe if you came to me and asked me if I needed people, it's just I guess it's just our solution to everything is to throw the military at it. And, that doesn't work. I don't remember the last time it has really worked.
I was thinking about this recently that in a way, you often get a preview of events to come, within a certain sort of lifetime experience. Like you can look at the response and the sort of institutional failings of one thing, and that gives you, in a way, a kind of precursor to what's going to happen in a larger crisis. I think that you could say, the 2008 bailout and the economic conditions it created are a pretty good precursor to what's happening now. But also, I think an even bigger one would be 2005 in New Orleans, what happened in Hurricane Katrina. And now Katrina is everywhere. And, there's something deeply pathological about the United States. And I say this as someone who, I left the United States, but I want to move back, I think, someday. I can't see myself spending the rest of my life in this country. So I'm not saying this from the perspective of someone who's like, okay, fuck America, I don't live in America anymore. I never want anything to do with it. It's where I'm from. And nothing's made me feel more American than living in the United Kingdom. I think if you look at 2005, you look at Hurricane Katrina, you have a situation in which the government didn't take the threat seriously. The state government and city governments were basically left to fend for themselves. When the crisis was unfolding, the government didn't take it seriously. The president didn't take it seriously. He didn't actually land and visit the city. He just flew over it. The Secretary of State basically was shopping and fucking going to Broadway shows while people were dying. In the aftermath, relief didn't arrive for a significant number of people. Insurance companies refused to honor policies. People weren't bailed out for that. People were forcibly moved to other parts of the country, were never allowed to return. Basically, they lost their property, they lost their livelihoods. The entire school system was privatized. There are no public schools in New Orleans. They're all charter schools now. Liberals in Chicago say, oh, I wish Hurricane Katrina would happen to us so we could do that to CPS, for example. That was something that was published in the Chicago newspapers in the mid-2000s. But 3,000 odd people died. Most of them were forgotten about, left behind because they couldn't swim or they couldn't evacuate. They were elderly. They died because of the heat. They drowned. They died because they didn't have medicine. People abandoned nursing homes and let the people all drown. The most vulnerable people in that society were just left to die wholesale. And the military and the National Guard and the reserves came in, but what they were able to do, they didn't really do anything to mitigate the real crisis, because at that point the city was flooded, the levees were breached, and people were dead. And so there were relief efforts, don't get me wrong, but in a way, ultimately, people just sort of shrugged it off and said, well, damn, sucks. But no one really suffered any consequences for it. The mayor of New Orleans at the time, I think, was eventually indicted on corruption charges years later. But he didn't go under for, some of the things that he failed to do. And certainly the governor of Louisiana, I do not believe, suffered any serious consequences. George Bush didn't suffer any serious consequences. In 2006, the Democrats retook the House and the Senate, but also I think a lot of that was to do with the Iraq War as well, and the sheer incompetence and corruption of the Bush administration. But there wasn't really any reckoning. There never was, and there never will be. New Orleans was destroyed. People that I know who are from there have said, it'll never be the same as it was, in our lifetimes. And no one really, most people in America, if you pick your average American and you think your average American being not college educated and probably white, basically blamed the people who died for their own deaths and said, we should have gotten out, you lazy fuckers. And that's the narrative. That's the New Orleans narrative, is you should have gotten out, you should have taken it seriously, you lazy assholes. I heard you were looting grocery stores, blah, blah, blah. All lives matter, blue lives matter, the end. And I think that's we certainly see that here in the United Kingdom, and I think you see that in the United States too, that no matter what happens, the people who have the luxury of large platforms and, well-funded positions are going to react to the failures by blaming the people who died for their own deaths. They're going to say, you should have X, you should have Y. Why did you go buy groceries? Why did you go to work to make money to buy groceries and pay your bills? No matter what, the government can never be a right-wing government can never be responsible. A right-wing government can never have fucked up so badly that they have to be held accountable. The power structures that exist will not allow it. A left-wing government, they would have called in the fucking military by now, both here in the United Kingdom and the United States. They would have done a coup by now. But a right-wing government, everyone has to die because then, the carried interest loophole or some shit. And it's disgusting, but I think the people who think that when this is all done, there's going to be a reckoning need to look at Hurricane Katrina, because it's 100% the model. There will not be a reckoning.
Oh God!
If there is a reckoning,
look at anything.
They will blame it on the libs somehow.
There's never a reckoning. I mean, shit. We never got Nixon on Watergate. He resigned and then he was pardoned. Like, we never got. Nobody's gonna get punished for Afghanistan. Nobody's gonna get punished for Iraq, because so many people at this point have fucked it up. That's it's impossible. You got a huge paper trail to go down. Katrina, Grenada, everything. There's never. Ollie North is still on Fox News. The man sold fucking guns to Iranians. What the fuck? Of course not. There will never be a reckoning. There may be, maybe what's going to happen is Joe Biden's going to get elected president and things are going to be not better. But libs are going to say that, hey, look at that. We got the guy who did less rape in. So high five, everybody. You're right. There's never going to be nobody's ever going to be punished for it. Shit, dude. Trump's approval rating is up, inexplicably, but you can't explain it because, hey, he's doing a thing, he's doing something, and so people are like, oh well, I like it, but if you're not as incredibly online as you, me, and everybody who listens to this podcast, you're not understanding. It's like, okay, here's the timeline of when he was saying that it was nothing, then when they were trying to racism their way out of it, and then when they were trying to cover it up, and now we're here, and now we're one of the worst countries. And go figure. Also, Louisiana is the third worst state at the moment, and they're really not doing enough to do anything about it. You're right. There's not going to be, nobody's going to get punished for this. And if there is, even the liberals, man, when shit crashed in 2008, 2009, and one banker who was some 22-year-old, junior vice something or other went to prison, and that's it, and nobody else does. That's not how this works ever. It's never how it works. And that is why you should probably just kind of give up on American politics, other than to laugh at it.
I've thought about this for a while. I don't want people to give up and get blackpilled, because I'm seeing really hopeful things as well. You're seeing a lot of labor activity. Workers at a GE plant are planning a walkout to basically demand that they convert their assembly lines to make ventilators. You're seeing walkouts and sickouts in grocery stores. You're seeing people organizing labor power in a way that's, especially in America, is an incredibly hopeful sign. But I don't think that we're going to escape from the human consequences of this. And I think I here in the United Kingdom have done some, have signed up for neighborhood mutual aid stuff, where literally we're just helping old people get groceries. And I've done a very little amount, but I've done some, and lots of people have done some, and just the conversations taking place there. I think that's a useful sign that I don't want us to not have a government, but I think that people, if you live in the neoliberal West, you have to acknowledge to yourself that 40 years of ideological cuts to the state have created a situation in which we are particularly exposed to a crisis like this because the state no longer has the capacity to respond in a meaningful way to stem or mitigate the negative consequences for most people. People who can't afford to get on their fucking Jeffrey Epstein planes and fly to goddamn bunkers in New Zealand.
It doesn't matter. We got a president that'll fucking pardon them anyway.
Well, exactly. The point I'm trying to make is that we are in a situation where we are particularly exposed. And we need to change that, and we need to change that by aggressively forcing our way into the state and expanding the state, and we need to also do it by aggressively protecting one another. I might hate your grandpa's politics, and I really hope that that he gets so mad at the libs that he accidentally breaks his TV and his internet connection so that he can't fucking waste my time with forward copy paste as either in support of Trump or Boris Johnson. But I don't want him to die, and I think that we've got to look at how best to support one another with the understanding that there is no emergency switch that we can flip in which we suddenly have a functioning state. What we are witnessing is the consequence of everything that's happened in your and my lifetime, and even before it to some extent. If Cynthia and I were talking about this yesterday, and it feels like, in a way, we are suffering because of the path taken because Reagan won in 1980, and here in the UK because Thatcher won in 1979. And to really undo and mitigate this problem, you've got to go back that far and look at all of the ways in which we've become more atomized, in which our society has been degraded, and try to start repairing that. But it's going to be the rest of our lives, assuming we can stop it now, which we can't. I hope that we have been able to mitigate this, that we've been able to have a humane and tolerant and not completely fucking psychotic pathological society by the time that I die, which hopefully will be 5 decades from now. But I don't know. I hope. It's going to take a long ass time and a lot of work, because what has happened over the course of my, 35 odd years on this planet has been the enriching of the few at the cost of the entirety of civil society. And we're seeing the consequences of that now. And this, more than anything, this disease is showing that, because you're in a situation where not only are the gaps and failings of the state being revealed because of the sudden inability of people to work and provide for themselves because of the conditions, but the normal solution, which is, funnel money into X to try to get more people working, can't work either, because people will not be able to contain the virus if they're out working and doing normal things that you need to do to keep the economy moving. And like I said earlier in this episode, I have absolutely no idea where we'll be on May 1st. I'm not blackpilled. I'm not giving up hope. I'm doing everything I can. But I think you have to be sanguine about it. You have to be realistic. And what we're looking at right now is a kind of rupture that we've never really lived through. I don't think there's anyone alive today who experienced the 1918 to 1920 pandemic with any, anything beyond being a very, very young child. There's no one left who can speak from a perspective of having been an adult and having watched it happen. They're all dead. I mean, it was over 100 years ago. I do not know where we're going to be. I hope in a better place, but we could also very much be in a much worse place where, all of a sudden the feudal barons like Eric Prince will have a lot more power, actual power, than they had before. I don't know what's going to happen. I just know that anyone who tells you they've got a solution, whether it's a macroeconomic solution or a broad-reaching political solution, if they're trying to tell you that they've got the answer, it's no different than people telling you to fucking, eat fish tank cleaner to kill the virus. This is a thing that's going to take decades to really repair. And right now, I think the best thing we can do is trying to use whatever we've got in our own communities and our own families to protect people that would otherwise be exposed, because in the long run, this is going to upend everything. And like anyone who tells you they know how it's going to shake out has already disqualified themselves as being full of shit.
Yeah, they're selling something. If anybody tries to tell
And
you
they're
that
not selling a goddamn podcast, which is what they should be doing.
this is truly the golden age of content now. Like everybody, what are you gonna do other than do jigsaw puzzles and have a podcast? Which speaking of, if you are somebody or if you know somebody who worked on a Navy hospital ship at any point in military career, let us know. We'd absolutely love to talk to you. Not just about this, but also I'm very curious about what goes on a Navy hospital ship. So please feel free to reach out to either myself or Nate. I think that'd be a really interesting conversation to have. And you know what, Nate? I'm not black pilled. I just don't trust. I've just learned to not trust electoral politics. Like, and that's and when I say that, I mean trust electoral politics on like a federal national kind of level. I am more like after this coming election, really no matter which way it goes, I'm really feeling like drawing myself into being more community centered. I already know like I'm moving. By the next time we record, I'll be in my new house. And I already know like a bunch of the neighbors and talked with them about just making sure everybody's okay. It's a really nice, very mixed neighborhood. People from all walks of life live there, and I love it. I have that where I'm at now. It's just also very loud because I'm on a I guess when you're on a when you're on a bus route, you get a lot of people walking by. When you work at home, Nate, people walking by talking constantly just not work doesn't work out for you. Um, but I that's what I feel like everybody you know should be doing. What do they always say when we were kids about Earth Day? Think globally, act locally. Do that, but with your politics too. That's all I
Yeah,
got.
man. I mean, that's all I can really say. And I think maybe then now is a good time to spin up a damn bonus content preview because I guess I don't want to go down a rabbit hole and rant about it because I think the most dangerous thing you can do is become numb to it all to the point where you just don't push back against anything. You know, when I do a lot of the mutual aid stuff, I see this happening. Like you have to help people even if you hate their politics. And that's not an appeal to say, "Oh, come together. This isn't political." It's absolutely political. But I mean, you have to accept the fact that the person who you're delivering groceries or medicine to is probably going to turn around and talk about the libs and welfare queens on social media. It's awful. We've got a situation in which we've fractured reality. It's just like it's hard to escape whichever respective terror dome you live in. But like you said, Francis, what you've got to do is be unwilling to accept the idea that you exist alone and that your community and your neighbors don't matter. And by doing so, you will be able to soften the blow, even if it's only to a slight degree. And that's about all anybody can ask for right now. I wish there was a better answer, but I mean, until we can create a raider force to go and fucking shoot bunker busters into Peter Thiel's bunker in New Zealand and start fucking reappropriating some real assets, I don't really know what else you can do besides damage mitigation. But on an unrelated note, you did a bonus interview, and maybe you want to talk about that really shortly.
Yeah, so somebody in the Discord at a convention of some kind found this group called Game to Grow, and it is this couple who are clinical psychologists, and they use Dungeons and Dragons to help people go through basically as a therapeutic tool, um, and so they do a lot with veterans, but they also do a lot of things outside of veterans. So I got I got the two of them on to talk about kind of what they do and how they do it, and just Dungeons and Dragons in general. It's a very interesting thing. It's an interesting interview where also I find out like just kind of going over and replaying in my head some of the games that I've played back in the day, that it is, in ways therapeutic, and it can be used in those kind of ways. So if you are a fan of psychology or psychiatry or Dungeons and Dragons, this is a great bonus interview. The two that I talked to were absolutely fantastic. So here's that.
I had someone in my group a little while ago who I got referred from another clinician, and they came in and they said, the reason I'm in this group is because my case manager hates me and I'm here to be punished. And I was like, great. So have you ever played D&D? And he was like, no, I think nerd stuff is stupid. And I was like, awesome. This is going to be lovely. And so kind of what I did there was I was like, you know what? This person, I've told them that they don't have to be in this room, but they feel like they don't have a choice for whatever reason. And so the way that I handled that was like, all right, you get to choose how much you engage. I'm going to give you a character. You chose to be a cleric, which is really complicated, but that's fine. And so he sat there with his character sheets, and he didn't really interact very much the first session. I'd go around, like when we got to combat, I'd kind of ask him if he did anything, and he would occasionally kind of engage, but mostly was just like sitting there and saying like, I don't want to be here. And so he came back the next week, which I was a little surprised by. And the next week he started interacting a little bit more, and he would actually start asking other people around the table, like, oh, what should I do next? Or what does this number on my character sheet mean? Or which dice am I supposed to roll? The third week he came back, he had an opinion about which dice color he wanted, which I was like, oh, cool. You care about something. This is great. And as we continued to move along, he started not only engaging more in the session during gameplay, but he started talking more in the processing. And he started talking about how he has a really hard time trusting people, and how he mostly just tries not to make relationships because it hurts too much when people leave. And he got to that played out very much through his character, but he also started having his character engage in more pro-social behavior and engage in more teamwork. And by like the fourth session, we got to kind of the processing. And one of the things that I will ask after to like move us into processing is, what did y'all notice today? And the first thing he said was, well, when I first came here, I thought all of y'all were idiots and this was going to be dumb. And I'm sitting there being like, okay, where is this going? And he was like, but, I'm actually finding myself looking forward to this group. And I have never looked forward to a group at the VA before. Like I've never done that. And we kind of kept moving in. And so I guess for me, I think one of the benefits of this intervention is he wouldn't have been able to do quite as much about titrating his engagement in a regular therapy group. Like his choice would have been to share his feelings or not share his feelings, and share his thoughts or not share his thoughts. But with D&D, he was able to, like session 1 and session 2, his character could make actions, but he could stay kind of separate from that character, right? Like, oh, I'm going to tell my character to go help my teammate, but that doesn't mean I like my teammate. Right? Like that's just what my character would do. And so you can create kind of a little bit more of this space. And then as we moved on, as he got more comfortable, as he started connecting with more people around the table and becoming more engaged in the content, especially as he had some successes, like he helped people, he kept people from dying. He was able to then kind of increase his engagement in a way that made him feel comfortable. And he wasn't kind of pushed on by me or another facilitator.
It's really hard to say, like, it is difficult to say treatment was a complete failure very often. Mm-hmm. A lot of times somebody is walking away with something, and they'll say, like, this was a worthwhile experience. Even if I didn't grow in the ways I thought I would, I am walking away with friends and a hobby that's going to engage me moving forward.
Absolutely.
Or I was depressed pretty heavily, and the mere fact that I was getting up and out of the house and coming to this group on a consistent basis because I started to value the experience and the people, that helped break out of that cycle. And I was able to observe how that cycle was interrupted at the same time of getting the benefits from being in this group.
And just like this group, I think, is great for a lot of people. And for some people, it might not be a great choice, or it might not be a great choice right now. Mm-hmm. I did have one client where she came to 2 sessions, and we met kind of after her second session. And she said, man, like I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I really need to be in control, and I learned that I'm having a really hard time with trust, and I'm learning that I'm pretty impulsive. And I didn't really totally understand those things about me. And she said, but I don't think I'm ready for this amount of engagement with other people right now. Like, I don't think that I'm up to doing this currently. And so she's kind of on the list where she's welcome to give me a call back and jump back in the group when she's ready. And I really appreciate that she was willing. Like, a lot of times when clients leave, they kind of, unless it's like feels like it's a great successful termination, oftentimes people just kind of disappear. And so the fact that she was willing to kind of sit down with me and she's kind of sought me out and made sure that I understood why she was leaving, I think says a lot to this intervention.
Or how much he respects the process.
Yeah.
Jared, you mentioned the other kind of fail. What do you do when you've got that one person playing that can't stop rolling the ones and twos?
That is that happens to everybody. So I do have a story of one character who struggled with frustration tolerance, and they struggled with failure. They were doing well for like a lot of the beginning part of this session, and then they came to a point where they were attacked by giant rats, and all they wanted to do was like help out in that fight. And they picked up their great axe to drop it down on that giant rat, and they rolled a 1. And they did not attribute the failure of that action to the randomness of the dice. Instead, they took it very personally. Like, I'm not good at this game. My character is not good at the roles that they are trying to take. Like, I am a failure. And then they started to shut down and disengage a little bit. And for the rest of the session, when it would come time for them to act, they were in a fight or they were trying to solve a puzzle, and the rest of the team would look to them, they would freeze up and not want to take an action even when they could, which frustrated them further, and some of the party. And then as that session continued on and this client started to recover and feel a little bit like better, be more grounded, and we started to process what happened in the session, they were able to identify, I realized that after I failed and how bad it felt, I did not want to experience that again, and I was trying really hard to not fail. So much so that I opted into not taking any action at all, which guaranteed that I did not get what I want. It harmed the people that I care about, and it felt really bad for me. And so they were able to walk away with increased insight that they have this draw to prevent failure from occurring, so much so that it keeps them from actually living the life that they want to and engaging in the things that they value. And once that light bulb clicked for them, they started taking more risks in the game and in life, and as a result, started getting more of what they wanted.
Absolutely. And there's a couple things that we will do in game to also kind of help facilitate kind of reinterpreting failure or looking at it a little bit differently. One of those things I actually got from Adam Davis, who's one of the executive directors of Game to Grow. And what he will do is when someone like rolls a 1, especially if it's something around a skill that they're working on. So like, I want to be more confident, or I want to speak up more, or whatever. And it's like a performance check that they failed. He will ask them to say, oh man, you rolled a 1. Like, what happened in your environment that led your awesome action to not work? Right. So like, you had this great speech prepared. You were totally going to convince the guards to let you go. But then what happened? And so that allows the player to be like, oh man, I had a really great idea, and then like a bug landed on my nose, or then I like forgot everything that I was going to say, or then, like a goblin burst out of the woods. And sometimes they create a little weird scenarios that you didn't have to figure out. But that's kind of that helps bring back this point of like, sometimes you can have really good ideas and they don't work.
Yeah, was the action that did not succeed a result of you, or was it a result of something external to you?
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, I like to ask questions in the processing portion. I like to ask players to nominate. So like, what is a player or a character that did something today that made your game more interesting? And so that could be like, man, well, Jimmy knocked down a door and then a bunch of goblins came out and we told him not to knock down the door and that was a bad idea. But like, now that I'm thinking about it, it was actually hilarious right? So we can kind of look at like, okay, it turns out in any situation, there's probably a lot of gray area.
Yeah, you can find a silver lining to most, like, quote unquote failures in the game. They're fantastic learning experiences.
And sometimes it's also just important to be sad that you failed.
Yeah, and learn how to hold that.
Like, we are very, as therapists, we are very on board with bad feelings. They're really important. They often tell you a lot of things.
I'd rather call them uncomfortable.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. As always, thank you. You can reach me at ArmyStrang on Twitter. You can follow Nate at In These Deserts. You can get us on Sergeant Joker at hellofawaytodie.com. It has been a month, obviously, and also I've been in the process of moving. I mean, I've been in this process for a fucking year at this point, but it is almost due ahead. So hopefully, I'm going to get back to writing again, updating the website a little bit more. But we also have, we've got the store out there. I'm still mailing stuff out. We've added some other things to the store, and also we have the Patreon. We absolutely understand that it is trying times. So if you have to drop your Patreon, because you've lost your job in a shitty economy, 100% understand. If whatever you need to do to survive, please do it. But if you are somebody who has been thinking about joining the Patreon, we would absolutely appreciate it if you jumped on board. You get a lot of bonus content. I mean, we've been doing this for 3 years, so we've got a shitload of bonus content, and hopefully you've been enjoying the free stuff that we've been throwing out there as well. It is the time of content. So here it is. We are here to give it to you and deliver it directly to your ears. So as always, thank you all for listening. And Nate, we'll talk to you next week.